Well, later today, the House of Representatives is slated to vote on a piece of legislation aimed at providing relief to victims of Hurricane Sandy. However, it seems the $50 billion bill won't pass without a fight. Lawmakers have been embroiled in a bitter debate over several pet projects that have made their way into the emergency plan, including billions of dollars of earmarks unrelated to helping the actual victims of the hurricane. So why is it so hard to pass legislation that would help those desperately in need? To help break this all down, Michael Brooks, a producer of the Majority Report, joins us now. Welcome there, Michael. So it seems, even when it comes to emergency relief, politics still determines the success of the bill.
Yeah, well, it's first of all, it's great to be with you. I think that that's true, and I think that you're seeing another opportunity here for Republican grandstanding about the budget, and it's really unfortunate. These funds need to be appropriated here in New York City. There are definitely sections of New York, New Jersey, that are not recovered at all. People are still really suffering. And a lot of these funds are actually really essential and really needed immediately to get people back on their feet. And there's also a disturbing pattern of using bills like this that are really essential, or on another scale, actually raising the debt ceiling, which is also pretty essential, to kind of score political points about things congressional people may or may not like about the budget. So it's pretty disheartening to watch, and it's definitely grounds for pretty major concern.
Now, Michael, I want to break down some of the specifics of this bill that has gotten quite complicated. $50 billion for hurricane relief aid. This has been broken down, $17 billion. This bare bones package, $33.7 billion amendment. It allows FEMA to make disaster aid grants based on estimated damage costs, and it also allows FEMA to fund limited repairs on homes. It also streamlines the environmental review process. So how will the money in this bill be doled out? Will it go directly to people who have lost their homes and businesses?
Well, unfortunately, there's going to be a lot of bureaucracy in terms of how this money's delivered. I think in the first bill that seems to be less controversial, the first $17 billion, those are very immediate things, like getting people home heating. Don't forget, it's a very cold part of the country here. You're talking about senior citizens that don't have heat and things like that. So it won't go directly into people's pockets, but I think it will be pretty easily and sort of streamlined in terms of availability for people to get funds for things like that. In the longer term, in terms of collecting insurance on houses or businesses or things like that, that tends to be a more arduous and complicated process. There's a lot of bureaucracy, and there's a lot of different things that people have to deal with. And, you still see people from previous disasters still waiting on claims and disputing how much money they've received to compensate for their losses. So in those areas, it gets a lot more problematic.
All right. Meanwhile, a lot of controversy in this bill and a big debate going on about the billions of dollars of pet projects that are sneaking its way into this bill. Can you talk about this practice and how it's affecting the ability for lawmakers to reach a consensus?
Well, I think it's important to make a couple of distinctions with that. I mean, this has always happened, and it is a problem. I mean, there was odd supplementals on Iraq and Afghanistan war funding, funding for people to build museums or do different things in their district. There's nothing new about this. On the other hand, I think that there are much bigger, more structural issues in terms of how we spend our money, in terms of the types of systemic corporate subsidies we give out to something like the oil industry as an example, how we deal with revenues and taxes that are actually a lot more fundamental than these projects, even though they can and often are a problem. But in this bill, what you see is a Republican Party which is more and more out of the Northeast, using a bill that will not really affect their constituents because they're not at the receiving end of this emergency.
Right.
to kind of extract political wins. So in this case, there's some legitimate issues being raised, but it has to be really cautious in terms of how it's being applied and when it's being applied. And if you look into some of the Republican members who are blocking this money now, they've certainly been, active earmarkers themselves. They've certainly gone out and gotten this type of funding for their districts themselves, even in non-emergency situations. Excuse me, even in non-emergency situations. So, I would kind of be wary about people having a sort of holier-than-thou moment about this funding, particularly now, given the severity of the situation.
Right. It's raising these questions that, people are using this bill for political gain when it's an emergency bill and there's people that are in desperate need of this funding.
That's exactly right.
I do want to say a lot of times, a lot of amendments with such a controversial bill like this being debated on the floor, it's not expected for a vote until later this evening. So could it change significantly by the final vote?
I doubt it. I think it will pass mostly in its current form. Again, actually, because of some of the things that we're already talking about. Favors are going to be owed. Favors are going to be pursued. I also think the other variable to keep in mind is that, Chris Christie, the governor of New Jersey, is definitely the most popular Republican nationally. And I think if he comes out again and gives more statements like he did a couple weeks ago, really taking the Republican leadership to task in terms of how they're dealing with this bill, they don't want to deal with that type of thing again. So I think that this will probably grow through. But it's already been far too long, and it's already been held up way longer than it should have been to begin with. And I think, again, where I am in the city, where I live and work, it's no problem. But if you go to Staten Island, you go to the Rockaways, a lot of people are still living in really even dangerous and very bad conditions, and they need that money now.
Right. Michael, appreciate you coming on. Our next reporter actually takes a look at this very concern. That was Michael Brooks. He is a producer for the Majority Report.
Thank you.